for this information that we have. Heather is going to go over some funds that we've received as a district over time, talk a little bit about how those were established, when they were established, and the process for those. So we wanted to be very transparent, touch base with you on those. We did have a survey, I know, out there and got input from people, but we just want to make sure that you have the information so everybody understands clearly what money we've received, where that money is going, what we can and we can't spend it on, because with federal funds, there are some things we have to make sure that we follow. And we are a people service-oriented business. And when I say that, our greatest resource is people that we can have to teach, to support, and so on with our kids. So you'll see a lot of that money that's where that goes, because we are a people business. I don't want to take any Heather's thunder. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Heather Roskowski. She is our Assistant Superintendent of Business Services, if you don't know her, and she is the numbers person behind our district. And it's kind of funny because whether it's me or Dr. Merkel or whoever, if there's some idea or thought, we're like, wow, that'd be great. We always have to go to Heather and say, can we? Do we have the money to do it? And so on. And Heather's that person that keeps our district in a good place. So without further ado, I'll turn things over to Heather. So Heather, take it away.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Just want to let you know right from the start, we are recording this, and it will be posted online as well as the slideshow presentation. So I'll get through that here. So just welcome and thank you for listening. I know sometimes people are like, are you excited? And I'm always excited to talk about numbers. It's my thing. So thank you for being here tonight. What we have up now is just the outline that will be used of what will be discussed tonight. So we'll start off with our federal funding philosophy. So right now, yes, we're getting an influx of federal funds, but we've always received federal funding. And so we'll kind of touch base a little bit on that and briefly go over a COVID-19 event timeline. We'll review the 15 allowable federal funding expenditure requirements for these new funds. I will explain and show you all the actual GPS federal expenditures for fiscal year ending 2020. 2021, and then our budgeted estimates for 2022, which is this current school year. We'll provide an update on ESSER 3 funding and also something that's coming, again, more federal funding, but it's called Section 11T. And then we'll go over any questions you might have. Can you all hear me well enough? Okay. So first of all, our federal funding policy, or philosophy, the district's philosophy on the use of federal funds, like Roger touched on historically, has been to cover salaries and benefits of staff assigned to service students needing additional help or intervention. Through assessments and the MTSS process, individual student needs are identified and aligned with specific interventions. So then the district staff work with and monitor the student's progress. So if something's working and the student progresses, they're moved out of that intervention. If it's not working, they'll rework things and try a different approach with students. Again, the district's greatest resource is our staff, and that's how we make the most bang for our buck in educating our kids, is through our people. Personnel expenditures make up between 84 and 85% of the district's annual budget, and that's salaries and benefits. Historically, the district has received the following types of federal funding. Title funding. So we received Title I, which is related, it's a census poverty formula. So the borders of Grandville, they look at what is a poverty level within those borders. So it doesn't necessarily have a makeup of what your district is, because you have school of choice kids coming in, but our allocation is based on the census poverty within our borders. And those funds are used, like I said, for intervention. Title II is a professional development federal grant that we use for coaching our teachers, whether it is literacy, having somebody come in and help how to teach literacy, to train and, again, provide those different interventions and techniques, or whether it's on the tech side of things, like tech coaches learning new technology in the classroom and how to best roll that out. Title III relates to English, limited English proficiency, and also immigrant funds. So again, targeting a specific subgroup with intervention. And then Title IV is, again, another intervention piece that I'll go over in a little more detail in the next couple of slides. So there's your title funding, and then there's your IDEA funding, which is your Individuals with Disabilities Education Act funding. That funding is federal, but it flows through the Kent ISD, and it is divvied up to all the districts in Kent County, all the local districts, based on your special ed student count. And special ed services ages 3 through 21. And then probably the one that's really increased is the child nutrition cluster. And that's increased because right now all lunches are free to all students, whether you're free or reduced, or you're normally a paid student. So the district receives a meal reimbursement. You receive a set amount based on breakfast and then a different amount for lunch for every meal that is served. And typically that is based on your free and reduced percentage. But right now it's open to everyone, so that those rates we're reimbursed for rates for everyone.
That's nationwide, right?
Yes. Yes, sir. Yep. So just a quick, I put the COVID-19 funding timeline on there. I do have a couple of sources linked in here, and you'll be able to access those once this presentation is posted online. So if you want to read more, you can. But I think the highlight is, for us, March 12th, that was not only the day that Michigan schools were ordered shut down, but the day my nephew was born. So I'll never forget that day. So essentially a week later, President Trump was asking Congress for $850 billion, not just for schools, that was for other payroll protection pieces for other businesses as well. And then 10 days later, President Trump signed the CARES Act into law. So you have these overarching acts that the big dollar amount is tied to, however many billions or trillions. And then understand that under the CARES Act, the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, ESSER, there are different subsets of ESSER. So under the CARES Act, we got ESSER 1 funding. Okay. 9 months later, almost exactly to the day, the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, still falling under the CARES Act, was passed, and that gave us ESSER 2 funding. And then most recently, President Biden signed the American Rescue Plan Act into law on March 11, 2021, and this funding is commonly known as ESSER 3. So moving forward, we talked a little bit about the philosophy of the district and how we utilize federal funds. I am going to read these allowable uses. Again, there is a link in here when you get the presentation if you want to read more. This ESSER FAQ is 61 pages. I am giving you the 15 allowable uses, and I want to read them because I want you to see how it ties back to our philosophy, and then as we move forward, how that philosophy shows in what we spent and where we spent our funding, okay? So any activity, the number one allowable use, any activity authorized by the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, or ESEA, and the ESEA was enacted in 1965, and it's the nation's national education law showing a long-standing commitment to equal opportunity for all students. In the past, you may have known it as No Child Left Behind, and the most recent reauthorization of it was the Every Student Succeeds Act. Okay. We have any activity authorized by IDEA, any activity authorized by Adult Education and Family Literacy Act, any activity authorized by the Carl D. Perkins Career and Technical Education Act. Now, that's commonly known to us in schools as CTE. Kent ISD has a large CTE program. Here in Grandville, we have a couple courses at the high school that qualify as CTE courses. Any activity authorized under Subtitle B of Title VII for McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. Coordinating preparedness and response efforts of LEAs, that's a local education agency. That's us, the district, another name for that. With state, local, tribal, and territorial public health departments and other relevant agencies to improve coordinated responses among such entities to prevent, prepare for, and respond to COVID-19. Providing principals and other school leaders with the resources necessary to address the needs of their individual schools. Activities to address the unique needs of low-income students, students with disabilities, English learners, racial and ethnic minorities, students experiencing homelessness, children and youth in foster care, including how outreach and service delivery will meet the needs of each population. Developing and implementing procedures and systems to improve the preparedness and response efforts of the LEAs. Training and professional development for staff of the LEA on sanitation and minimizing the spread of infectious disease. Purchasing supplies to sanitize and clean the facilities of the LEA. Planning for, coordinating, and implementing activities during long-term closures, including providing meals to eligible students, providing technology for all online learning to students, providing guidance for carrying out the requirements under IDEA, and ensuring other education services can continue to be provided consistent with all federal, state, and local requirements. And that right there, when I read that one, it just kind of hit me because those are all things we did during that closure, right? Like provided meals to students, had online learning available where necessary. Number 13, purchasing educational technology, including hardware, software, and connectivity for students who are served by the local that aids in regular and substantive educational interaction between students and their instructors. This may also include assistive technology or adaptive equipment. 14, providing mental health services and supports, including through the implementation of evidence-based full-service community schools. And the last, allowable use, planning and implementing activities related to summer learning and enrichment and supplemental after-school programs, including providing classroom instruction and online learning during the summer months and addressing the needs of low-income students, students with disabilities, English learners, migrant students, students experiencing homelessness, and children and youth in foster care. A common theme throughout are those subgroups.
What does including through implementation of evidence-based full-service community schools mean?
So evidence-based practices are items vetted like multiple tier system of support. So your MTSS, full service, the entire, like I think full service community schools to me means K-12. If not even ECSE, preschool.
It just was weird looking.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I took this straight from the document, so.
Evidence-based usually means that there's been something studied and it has to have a result showing evidence before they can implement it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Good point.
All right, so moving on, fiscal year ending June 30, 2020. This chart here shows again the type of grant, the grant amount, how much we spent in that fiscal year, any carryover. I should explain to you that the state's year runs October 1 through November 30, but our school year runs July 1 through June 30. So for any of these grants, it's not, it is typical to have carryover because we have an extra 3 months to spend those funds, essentially. And then there are funds that can also carry over into next year's allocation if they go unspent. Sometimes the unspent funds that you're seeing are timing issues. So we have Title I. We had a grant amount of $476,000 in 2020. We spent just under $463,000. And it was used to pay for intervention for teacher and para salaries and benefits at East, Central, and West. And that's key because remember I told you it's formula driven. So those 3 buildings have the highest free and reduced percentage in our district. So those are the ones that are school-wide. Now that's not to say that your child goes to Century Park or Cummings and they're not receiving intervention services. They're just not funded with title. They are still receiving services. The state has money set aside. It's called at-risk or 31A funding that they give. And they also have formulas in place to make sure that we are treating the buildings equally. So it's called Title I comparability that we have to pass each year. And they're comparing it to our 31A funding. Title II, again, we talked to district instructional coaches, salaries and benefits. We also do have a set aside for non-public. That is a requirement of Title II. So there are non-public schools in our borders that we set aside funds for based on, again, on a formula. However, it's up to those non-publics whether or not they apply and say they want to take those funds. Sometimes they don't want to take them for whatever reason. For whatever reason they might not feel the need to do that at that point. So again, Title III limited English, that was used for para salaries and benefits at the middle school, high school, and West. Immigrant funding was used that year to purchase some dictionaries for students. Title IV was spent on pathways intervention, another intervention through KSSN services, which is Kent School Service Network. Thank you. And again, we had have a small set aside for the non-public supports under Title IV. Our IDEA funding ranges typically from 1.1 million to 1.3 million. That goes to support our resource room teachers' salary and benefits. And we have a small IDEA preschool federal grant that we receive that we cover early childhood special ed teacher salary and benefits with. McKinney-Vento, that's typically bus passes and any type of supplies that students identified as homeless might need. And then the bottom two were new because of the CARES Act and ESSER. So you have child care relief, and that was to cover child care salaries and benefits for our Treehouse program. You'll note the grant amount of $296,000. We could only claim $29,000 in 2020, and that has to do with the timing of the legislation and when it was signed and how much we could pull back. And please understand, all of these federal funds are reimbursement based. So we have programs in place, not knowing if we're going to receive funding. Okay.
All those numbers up to CARES, that's pretty much like your typical year to year.
Correct. Yep. Those are our, yep. So, the CARES and then the ESSER were the two new ones that we were able to received some of the funding in 2020. ESSER 1 formula, they made a change in ESSER 2 and 3, but initially they used the same title formula for ESSER 1, and that's why there's a set aside for non-public supports. Legislatively, they worked through that, and going forward, there will not be non-public set aside from the ESSER funds. So the ESSER 1, we utilized counseling and social work services and benefits. And I do kind of want to highlight too, in 1920, that was the year where COVID wasn't on our radar when we were planning for 1920. And that was the year that, Roger jokes, they come to me and say, can we afford it? But we had a lot of conversation about what's needed with our principals, building wise, helping with the MTSS system, those tier 1 behaviors, et cetera, and what's needed. And resoundingly, it came back with, well, we think we need more counseling and social work services to help with that. So I think it's great that we had that forward thought process to add that, and now it's being covered with these funds just because of the situation. So moving forward, last school year, June 30, 2021, you can see the lines get longer. But the Title 1, 2, 3, 4, IDEA, McKinney-Vento, they're all consistent.
So on the very bottom of the remote teaching.
Yep.
With this, you still have the 1.26 million. With the bottom, do you know around about how many remote teachers?
Yeah, let me get there. Okay, because yes, I can give you that number. So I won't go through all the way down to the McKinney-Vento again, because I think we've covered it. It's basically the same. The only difference between 21 and 22 was in the Title III immigrant. We got a little bit more funding, and we put that plus the carryover toward the para salaries and benefits. The $260,000 that was carried over for the child care relief was spent again on child care salaries and benefits. Spent the remaining ESSER 1 formula that was available, that approximately $67,000 on counseling and social work. Then we were given another CARES child care relief tuition. That was just an in and an out for us, because that money all went back to families who were paying tuition for Treehouse and preschool. ESSER 2 came out at approximately $1.4 million, again because of timing. And when it came out, we were able to use $560,000 of that to cover, again, counseling and social work salaries and benefits, carrying over $835,000 of ESSER 2 into the current school year. Section 103.2 district COVID, that was a specific set of funding for PPE, cleaning supplies, and sanitizer. And then the Section 11P COVID relief funds that you're referencing, those are federal funds, but they flowed through our state aid status report. And so it came in a big, basically lump amount. And we did use those for all the remote elementary teachers that we needed to hire. At the end of the day, we added 18 staff. There were some current staff that then switched to teach remote as opposed to in the classroom. But so that is encompassing probably close to 24 teachers there, 20 to 24.
And our philosophy on that was, instead of going and buying something off the shelf or some program out there that somebody had, people really overwhelmingly wanted us to duplicate as close as possible a Grandville education and what was going on in our in-person classrooms. So what we did is when we hired those remote teachers and had the remote learning that took place for our kids, our goal was to duplicate an in-person experience as much as we can. Now, can you do that exactly? Well, that's why we're in person, and it's because we do believe in person is much better. But at that time, considering the circumstances, we wanted to make it as close to a Grandville education as possible. Thus, the number of teachers that we hired to make that a reality.
So is that bottom line that was just for the 24 remote teachers?
Yes, correct, for their salaries and benefits.
Like an awful lot of money for 24 teachers.
So 2 million did we got between 24 people?
And you have
I
to.
just want to make sure you know the question I'm asking.
Yeah. Yep.
Let me, I can pull up the exact amount because, again,
5 million in social. How many does that? I should see that.
yeah, let me finish the presentation because I have to open another spreadsheet and I will give you the counts on those from 2021.
And remember, that's not just a salary, that's retirement, that's benefits, that's all the things that go into that for a given teacher and support people.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so there are, and I think too, so just from a full family insurance standpoint, there are minimums that the district pays, and that's $20,000 to pay insurance for a full family coverage. It's around 12 or 13. Those dollar amounts are posted annually on the state's website. So like Roger said, when you're talking about the benefits side of it, so for every dollar, essentially it costs the district probably $1.42. Okay.
And then maybe it's a further question, but how many you said roughly 1.2 to 1.3 million for the resource teacher salaries.
Yeah.
Round about how many teachers is that? You don't have an answer right now.
Yeah, that is probably 12 to 13, but I need you to understand there's more resource teachers than what that grant covers. So the difference is those resource teachers that aren't covered under that grant, that comes from general fund dollars. Okay. Budget for this year ending June 30, 2022. Again, similar amounts and uses in all of the title and IDEA. You'll note we did receive a reduction in our IDEA, both on the flow through and the preschool side. McKinney-Vento, that's a rough estimate for right now. That'll probably go up here a little bit. And then I will get you the final on the counseling and social work numbers for this year in terms of how many staff. ESSER 3, currently only 2/3 of the ESSER 3 funds are available for budgeting. It's anticipated that the remaining $1 million will be made available for allocation in the early calendar year of 2022. At which point, we're going to take ESSER 3. That's the other thing I want you to hear. We'll spend some of it in this year, but the majority of it will be spent, if not all of it, in the following year. So there's timing implications on this as well. It has to be spent by June 30th, 2024. So we'll spend a little bit this year and then some the next year. The light maroon highlight is section 11T. Those funds are not yet available for budgeting. Those are funds that are federal, but they are going to require a separate application which the state has not yet released. Again, it's anticipated that it's almost another $3 million available for early calendar year 2022. But this section has even more spending requirements than ESSER 3. And so in order to do it right, we need to take some time and create our programming, because we need to provide 51% of the funds. So you're looking at like $1.4 million, $1.5 million, to go towards learning loss. Summer programming is another 10, and then before and after tutoring would be another 10% of that.
By learning loss, do you mean the COVID effect on the learning, like the fall behind from that?
Any type of learning, yes,
Okay.
any type of learning loss, potentially yes, they're targeting that, but they're also targeting it at the subgroup level.
So is the benefit really the 2.9 million, or is it really more like 1.6? Like, because when it says if we have to provide half, I would infer that means we're gonna pony up a three ourselves to match it versus, that, you know what I'm saying? Are you telling
No.
me or no?
No,
It says it says $3 million is the grant amount, and we have to pay 54% of it. So to me, that means the whole Section 11T is really 6 million.
no, the Section 11T is really 3 million, but 50%, 51% of it is going towards learning loss. There's no, I mean,
Oh, and so the rest can be for other.
Yeah,
purposes.
they're
right,
telling
the rest,
us-
sorry, the rest, they're telling
what
us.
percentage of that money
gotcha.
we have to pay into what, or we
Okay.
have to spend on what.
The bottom three lines, were all programs that fall under ESSER 2. They were subsets, and it was stuff that we did last summer. Our summer K-8 program, the high school credit recovery program, and then the last line, the before and after. Again, we are in the process of working on that programming. And I think that application will be submitted soon, but it will be for before and after school intervention and tutoring.
Is that dependent on kids, like grades, obviously, what's allocated to?
Yes, it's dependent on grades and we use the data, analyze the data to see who could benefit from that. And then they're invited to be a part of that if their parents choose.
That 25,000 is just what Grandville's allocation was.
And then for the tutoring, is that offered or to any student? Or do they have to be below a certain, the before after tutor?
They would have to meet guidelines, but I would say if they're struggling, it would, I would think they would qualify. Since a huge chunk, if you look at that overall money, a huge chunk is focused on learning loss.
Okay.
So if you could demonstrate that a student is exhibiting that, then you should be able to spend it.
Okay.
Was the same amount per student offered or allocated for every student across the country? Or how would that work?
The 20, so these subsections of ESSER 2 are, it's not going to be the same for every state, because so what happens is the feds give the allocations to the states, and that's why only 2/3 of the ESSER funds are available right now, because the feds didn't like Michigan's plan. So they came back and said, we're going to only release X amount, and because that's the percentage of the plan they agreed with. This last third, it has now been approved, it's just not available. So it takes time from when the federal government says, yes, we approve your plan, then the state government gets involved, and then it takes so many 30 days for their application to come out, and then we have 60 days to finalize and fill out our application, and then we wait for their approval, the state's approval, and then we move forward.
How about within Michigan? Would it be the same for students across Michigan? No.
Which section, I guess? Just the ESSER money in general? Great question.
Just wonder if you have to do anything to qualify.
No.
Requirements for this?
Yeah, so in terms of Grandville's going to receive ESSER 3 monies totaling $565 per pupil. What that Section 11T is trying to do, what the state is trying to do, is give every student in the state of Michigan, basically, or every district, a per pupil amount of $1,093. So districts like Grandville, Forest Hills are going to get 11T funds. And what that 11T is, it's another $528 per pupil to get us to the 1,093. You have some districts, Godfrey Lee, Godwin Heights, they're not going to get Section 11T because their amount that they're getting based on that formula from the feds is going to meet that 1,093 per pupil amount. It's really confusing, isn't it? Yeah. Welcome to my life.
You're half attorney.
So, I like puzzles too, not just numbers. But here's where this is again where it gets a little more rigid, if you will, because so any district that is getting the 1,093 under ESSER 3 because of their poverty level, right, does not have the same requirements that we have.
Okay. So
That 51%, they're not getting that. Right. So if you look, I tried to give you guys a breakdown of the differences between ESSER 3 and in terms of requirements. So we have, the stakeholder input from families, students, teachers, principals, and the public. 20% of the ESSER 3 is set aside to address learning loss, and they break that down into 4 categories. And the social emotional piece fits within that 20% learning loss. And then we have a maintenance of equity requirement too. So what that means is we can't just accept this money, use it, and then when it goes away, just start slashing programs and people. There's a formula again that you have to follow so that you're not disproportionately cutting programs.
Does this take into account school of choice?
Yep.
You just mentioned the social emotional learning thing. So was that a requirement if you had?
I'm sorry, mental health. So same thing, I guess. Sorry.
Okay. Well,
yeah. I guess social emotional is part of what they're looking, to address in the learning loss. Yes.
That's kind of, how can you do that? That's subjective. How can you versus objective? Emotional is not, how can you quantify emotional learning loss?
Yeah. When you look, and that's why
I think depending on how you are and what state you are in emotionally, it does impact your learning. If I go to school and I don't get a chance to eat breakfast, or if I come to work and I didn't get a chance to eat breakfast, that's going to affect differently than maybe if I had breakfast. And I know that's maybe that's a lame analogy, but
it makes your point.
Right.
But that's driven by the SSRT, by the other thing that's done to correct this,
I don't know what that's. Sorry.
or the what, I forgot the acronym.
Oh, making sure they have food.
Right.
The nutrition
yes.
piece.
Yeah, the other things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And again, these are listings of things they've said to us that you need to consider and try to address.
So that is required for us to have those programs.
It is required for us to utilize the funding under the 15 allowable uses. That very first one, the ESEA, that is, we can use that for anything. That is,
and I guess what you're asking is, must we do those things in that list? The answer is, or do all of them? No,
Right.
We don't have to do all of them. Mm-mm. We provide the supports where the supports are needed.
how about all the COVID mitigation? masking, testing, quarantine, is that a requirement at all to receive it?
No. So the stakeholder input survey, I'll try and use my mouse to kind of hover a little bit, but just wanted to give you an idea. We received 1,024 responses, 47% from elementary, 9% from middle school students, or not students, I'm sorry, parents, 20% from high school, 0.5% from students, 22% from staff, and then just under 1% from the other category. And what the survey results showed, I think when we look at our 4 highest percentages, the first one, I'm going to kind of go around the pie, and I apologize for how this is shown, but if I start here with, can you see that up there? Oh, you can't see it up there.
I can't even see your mouse even.
Yeah, you can't. Okay, so.
Oh, it's in the PowerPoint.
Yeah, it's in the PowerPoint. So the 11% there, the 458, that correlates to that first box up there, added in the instructional support for intervention. And then as you go around, you go down. Okay, so that starting point of that 11% for added instructional support, then we had 9% for instructional materials to help with learning recovery, 16% add services for mental health. Sorry, usually when I click on it, oops.
So you're gonna share this?
Yes, yep, it'll be online and recorded. It'll be easier to see online. So add service, the 16% is the add services for mental health and wellness. And then the 17% is provide small group instruction. So when we talk about philosophy and we talk about the allowable uses and then where the money has gone so far, I think those kind of all tie back together, and I hope that you can kind of see those lines. So if I can answer more questions, I can look up those number of staff for you. Okay.
Any other questions in regards to Heather's
And
presentation?
the only reason why I ask is because I'm going to stop recording if we don't have any more questions.
I just have a question. So, for example, Grandville Elementary, absolute just mess for pickup and drop off. They want us to plant the grass, wood, paving, another driveway where you guys have those split flat poles in the grass. Maybe paving another path if this is how it's going to continue.
Yeah, that wouldn't be out of these funds. That would be something.
Because of COVID that they're doing this, you can't walk in, you have to drive up.
Literally
So the
can't
line is
park to
half
pick
a
up
mile
our
down the
kids.
road.
Yeah, I've visited out there a few times
It's
recently
You
to
should see it now, there's this huge mothball.
take a look. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I'm not driving through it. I will be shutting through the street. In case you get a complaint, it's probably me. I'm sorry, but like, I'm not driving in the mud.
Yeah.
If maybe, because it is COVID related,
Mm-hmm.
maybe can spin it with you, if you can spin it with them.
So you're referring to the side of 52nd by the front
Like the
of
east, like
Grandville.
going east on 52nd Street, like with Grandview.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or should we expect all this to go away June or January 2, 2055, right?
It'd go away.
That way your parents can be allowed back to pick up and.
Is it back to normal?
Yeah, I think the system that was set up, I'm not sure. I mean, I would have to talk to them about their system. Is it truly the COVID, because of COVID, they set that system up, or did they set that system
No, that
up?
was definitely because of
Okay.
COVID. Like,
Change.
my son went from kindergarten
Okay.
to 6th grade there, and I've never been there.
day.
You know, he's in high school now.
Masks
Mhm.
are going away, right, in January? So
What's going away?
Masks.
Mask will, yeah, based on right now, mask will be a
It
choice.
seems like
Yeah.
all these driving pickups should go
Yeah.
away as well.
I would have to have discussion and find out and see where they're at with
Not
that.
just there, I think all elementary's probably do that, right?
I don't know.
It's just bad at Grandville. I don't know how it is in the other ones.
You know, I've been in education 32 years. I was an elementary principal for 13 of those, and I've never seen a quality drop off for about a 10 to 15 minute window at an elementary. Every elementary I've been associated with has its own, unique circumstances during that window of time because there's so many people dropping off, including buses and so on. So, but I will reach out. I'll go back to Emily and their crew and have some discussion and see with things changing in January whether I doubt. I would think you would have heard if they were changing
She said
something
how
that
it
quick.
is how her plan is for the
Rest of the year.
And that they didn't have the staff for the kids to be in the front, where it's like you have eight people just.
Yeah, they have a lot of people out
And it's
there
like,
helping move
half
people
of them
along.
over there and let
Mhm.
parents park and pick up their kids.
Yeah.
This whole problem would go
I know
away.
their big worry, and again, I want to get back to this, but
Sorry.
and we can talk more
Yeah,
about that
yeah.
later. But I think their big worry that I hear is kids running out into the parking lot with the buses, and they've got to find, and maybe there's something facility wise we could do. They have a large area on the other side as well. I don't know, but we certainly could look at that down the road and see, is there a better way?
The snow's gonna hit.
It will.
It's getting out.
Eventually it will,
Yeah.
I'm sure. We're lucky right now,
Talk
but
about this because he's-
COVID.
like she said, or I thought, we all thought, a lot of us thought, we could use that money for it because it is COVID related. That's why they're doing it. It's not for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'd be
That's the problem
curious.
when my kids went to that school.
Yeah,
There's a change.
yeah. And I might want to get more specific with you on the where, okay?
Okay.
So we'll talk
So,
about
like, in a nutshell, basically, I think the reason, I can speak for a few of us here, we're here to see what strings were attached to this money.
Mhm.
And what I'm hearing is that the strings attached to this money are the same strings attached to normal money,
Yes.
not necessarily special COVID related. It's being given to us, we're being given more because of COVID. The
Yes.
strings are basically the same. Is that, it might be an oversimplification, but basically true?
I would agree with your statement. Yes.
Okay.
There was an email that went out, I believe it went out to staff, I don't know that I was able to get. And part of what I highlighted, it says federal funding requires compliance that recipients must follow, as well as required funding targets and timelines. So we talked about the targets and timelines, but the word compliance.
Yeah.
It requires
So-
more compliance. We'd like to know.
Sure.
What do we have to be compliant to receive? the
Every
money?
year, I have to go through a week-long audit with an outside audit firm. After that, we submit all of our financial data to the state of Michigan. From there, depending on what they see, or if I'm the lucky one, they will come and do an audit of all of our federal funds. So you have your, I'm gonna call it your normal audit, which is like all of our operations and that type of thing, your food service, all of that. And then you have what is called a single audit, which is all of your federal funds. And so you go through the audit and your auditors put together an opinion on your operations and your federal funds. And then you submit everything to the state. And then state auditors come in and they focus a lot on your federal funds, because ultimately at the end of the day, federal auditors are coming in and auditing the state. So and that sounds like something I might have wrote. Because that's what I mean by compliance. I am strictly meaning, yes, yep. And so like we talked about it being reimbursement based. So we have to have in our office, once the plan is approved, we give it to our accounts payable person, and we say, okay, this year is getting charged to this account, this account, this account. And then stuff goes on in the buildings or through curriculum office. However, all the invoices come to us, and she's going to look at it and go, this really doesn't look like what this says. And so then we have to go back and make sure that it is in line. We have the opportunity to amend those applications. But from there, I'm strictly talking about all of our federal compliance. And part of that federal compliance is allowable use. Because when we write in the application of what we're going to do and we don't do it, we get dinged for that.
Use that money for playground equipment. That's a compliance problem.
Yes.
For a really
Yes.
silly-
Yep. IDEA, FTE, so that's full-time equivalency, because I have some people that are only partially charged there and the rest of their time is charged elsewhere, is 10 FTE. So that's the IDEA one, and that was the $1.1 million to $1.3 million. Okay.
And then the other one being 24, was that?
The other one being the section 11P for the remote. Let me pull that up.
Now, was that teachers that were remote / in-person as well? Or was that strictly to just?
The CRF funding was our elementary, it was really focused on the elementary remote. There may have been a portion of like secondary that were charged to both, but the brunt cost was that elementary remote, because we've always had a little bit of remote at the secondary level through Odyssey Ware teaching. So let me pull that up for you real quick.
And so I don't have elementary kids either, so I didn't have to deal with that. So you didn't need to have it on a ratio, because elementary, you could have elementary kids from every building going to one elementary grade level teacher.
We had to break it up because there were so many.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
you
And-
still wanted to keep it like an in-person class size, right? So
Right. And during that time, when you had in-person learning, you had spacing requirements during that time, distancing, and ours worked out well enough where we had enough kids remote that we could have remote teachers teach them. And like I said, mirror the Grandville education experience as much as possible. Our in-person kids, because we didn't have everyone here, we were able to do the spacing requirements, thus keeping them in school as well for the different things that were there at that time. So it was a unique situation.
But you didn't have to hire an every grade level for every elementary school, is what I was getting at, I guess. You didn't need a K through 6 sets of K through 6 remote teachers. You needed
we had at least 4 sections, sections per grade.
Yeah.
That were remote.
I mean, so we're a 5,600 student district, and during the 2021 school year, 20% approximately, maybe a little more, just depending on the time of the year, were remote.
Mhm.
So,
So like at Century Park, there was one teacher per grade.
Great.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Century Park. They were just teacher. remote.
Yeah, okay, gotcha.
All the other students that went in person went to the other teacher.
Gotcha.
But it was at least one per grade.
I have to find,
There's not remote now though, right?
there is.
There
still
is
remote.
on a very small scale. There are some kids whose parents chose to stay remote for circumstances. For example, if you had a mom or dad at home with cancer and was very hesitant to send
Okay.
kids to school, afraid they were going to end up getting COVID or whatever, they might keep them home or
Okay.
some
Yeah,
situation.
extenuating circumstances.
Yeah, but they were circumstances, and we actually, because we value the in-person experience so much, they had to go through a screening process, almost like an interview, and had to meet some of those types of requirements to be remote this year. So we do have a very small scale program going on with that. Any luck there?
I'm trying
That's
to
okay.
find that Google Doc that was shared with. maybe.
So when do you think you would know, like, indefinite? I mean, probably not until the day of, obviously, phone, but when will you be able to announce that coming back from Christmas break, you know?
Later this week, I have a letter that's already drafted, and I plan on sending that letter out, and that does say that the order ends, I believe it's January 2nd, and so January 3rd, when we return for our elementary kids, like our middle school and high school kids, that mask will be optional. And it does say unless something happens, but I've been assured.
There was Adam London posted that
Yeah.
he's not planning to renew.
Yeah, we met with him, it was either last week or late the week before, and he was clear. And he had also sent us a communication at that time. So, yeah.
And we're going into an election.
That can have its advantages and disadvantages. Because we are going into election year, and sometimes people don't like to do things that make people mad. So it has its good and bad. Do you want to
Nope,
send
I
it?
got it.
Oh, you got it?
Yep.
Okay.
It was 20.
20? And was that 20 just remote only teachers?
Yeah.
Or were they
Yeah.
remote and in person?
That was just remote. Those were all elementary. There were 20 that we had more than 20, but I think we had around 24. Actually,
On staff.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep. And like I said, we could have purchased services from
Yeah.
some program, and it would have been somebody else's product that we would have been teaching our kids. And when we had done, I think you remember, we did surveys at that time, and people were very clear that they wanted a Grandville education as much as possible. And that's why that's what we attempted to do to the best of our ability.
The binder from last year was phenomenal.
Mm.
It was like, it was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I've talked to other high school parents who
This was
went that
amazing.
way with the bucket or canned.
Mm-hmm.
And even with, I would say, we had to have those days, the Fridays, what did they call, there was a word for them.
Yeah.
The Fridays. to
Like intervention
adjust-
Fridays.
And they, even with those, it was still far better than what kids were doing in other schools. So I
thank you.
have to say, from what the stories I heard from other parents, that we did a good job on that. So,
We
thank you for that.
had never been in that boat, and we worked hard and worked together and tried to make it as Grandville as possible. So that's for sure. Any other questions? Well, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And
Thank
have a
you
good
for
evening.
explaining it.
Merry
Yeah,
Christmas,
you're
Happy
welcome.
New Year if we don't see you.